Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of Sports Spectrum is brought to you by Compassion International. For more information about how you can release a child from poverty, go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum. Compassion.com/sportsspectrum. 7,500 churches in 25 countries are working together to deliver God's loving care to children in need, one child at a time. You can help make that difference by sponsoring a child with compassion and providing food, education, medical care, and vocational training, all done in Jesus' name to a child in need. Go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum and consider sponsoring a child today. Today on the podcast, we welcome Akbar Gbajabiamila to the podcast, host of American Ninja Warrior on NBC. He's also an NFL Network analyst. You can see his broadcast work there. He played professionally in the NFL for 5 seasons, from 2003 to 2007 with the Raiders and the Chiefs and the Dolphins. He retired in 2008. And now you can call Akbar an author. His latest book, his newest book, released in May of 2019, is called Everyone Can Be a Ninja. Find your inner warrior and achieve your dreams. This was a fascinating interview, Akbar Gbajabiamila. You'll love his journey. I thought we were going to talk a lot more football, but we ended up talking a lot more faith, and I like that. As much as I can here on these podcasts to try and intersect both of those worlds. And we did talk a little on American Ninja Warrior and certainly about the book and why he wrote it, but even more his faith journey, growing up with a dad who's Muslim and a mom who was Christian, and what that was like as a kid growing up, and then coming to faith in Jesus on his own merit in terms of what that looked like for him to make that relationship with the Lord his own, and how he navigates that now in a world that is lacking kindness and empathy. He spoke beautifully about how we need more empathy in our walks with the Lord. And I loved at the end, as I ask all of our guests the same question about what he's learning from God, and his answer was one where you want a pen and a paper, or you want the phone out in the note section, you want to type the quote in, because it's one of those quotes where I'm going to use it, I think, as a sermon or even as an opportunity to write a devotional, because it was just such a great answer. So take a listen to our conversation with Akbar Gbajabiamila, author of the new book, Everyone Can Be a Ninja, former NFL player, NBC host of American Ninja Warrior, here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Akbar, welcome to the podcast.
Jason, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm happy to be with you guys.
I'm looking forward to talking to you. Your story is a fascinating one, and I love that you wrote a lot about your journey in the new book, Everyone Can Be a Ninja. So let's start there. It's always good to talk about when you have something new coming out, the book, and I think the book really is going to take us on this journey in our conversation here to all that God's done in your life. Tell us about the book and why you wrote it.
Well, the book to me was a passion project because there's this thing that I got from hosting. It's been 7 years now that I've been hosting the show, and it has been a lecture hall, a classroom, so to speak, where I've really had the chance to be able to go out and see these ninjas compete at a high level. And what they're doing is they're overcoming obstacles, and them overcoming obstacles made me start to think about the obstacles that I had to overcome in my own personal life. Yeah. And I go, you know what? I've seen thousands of them do it, and they have a rhythm that they're going through, and there's a process. And so I wanted to be more vulnerable and share an inspiring story about some of the obstacles that I had to overcome in my own personal life. And I talk about my story, but I also share some of the ninja stories too that have touched me over the years, like Brian Arnold, Zach Gowen, and then some non-ninjas like my former teammate, Nnamdi Asomugha, Allison Felix. And when people hear the title, they think it's a book about actually how to become a ninja on the show. But really, it's a book about how to become a ninja in your own personal life and how to overcome these personal obstacles. And for me, I was probably the unlikely candidate to be hosting a primetime television show like American Ninja Warrior, being an undrafted free agent out of San Diego State to the Oakland Raiders, and, having really a journeyman career, going from the Raiders for a couple of years to the Chargers, then to the Dolphins, back to the Raiders. I wouldn't be the person that you would picture, working at the NFL Network or hosting American Ninja Warrior. And I say that not in a way to brag, but in a way that, not being defined by your circumstances. In the book, I talk about rejecting your circumstances. And I talk about growing up in South Central Los Angeles during the LA riots and during the time when gang activity was at an all-time high. And it's very, very easy to be comfortable in your environment and to be able to point fingers and blame and to play the woe is me game and say, well, hey, this is just the circumstance that I grew up in. And this is not to diminish or to put anyone down who's gone through, whatever adversity. But I guess the point is that, like the show, you see these ninjas going through one obstacle, then the next one gets crazier, then the next one's harder, and the other one is like, hold on, it's so simple, it's hard. And I started thinking, I was like, this is just like life. It's a metaphor for life. And I wanted to be able to approach it with the same moxie as these ninjas approach the obstacles on a physical level.
Part of the fun in releasing a book, and I had this experience last year, is kind of getting feedback from people who've read it and hearing the response from different people. What's that been like for you, and just hearing some of the people that weird, yeah.
Weird. Yeah, it's weird because, when you're vulnerable, it's like, and excuse me if this is too graphic, but it's like, if you're naked and people get to see, just this weird feeling like, oh my gosh, I was supposed, what is it? Like there's this insecurity. Oh, yeah. And it's the same thing when you open yourself up and you share your life story and you share your experiences, especially now where on social media, everyone's so critical. And so everyone's so like, oh, you shouldn't think this way and you shouldn't be this way. And so it's just like, I'm just sharing my own personal experience, my opinions. And how I see life and the things that I've learned from life. But the other thing is you don't think that it's as important. It was my manager who kind of forced me to kind of, you should do a book. I was like, nobody's going to want to read a book about me. Like, right. My insecurity tells me that, who cares? You know what I mean? What makes you special that somebody's going to want to read your book? And that's what I struggle with. And I share some of those insecurities in the book as well. And I was in Connecticut, actually. One of our top ninjas, Drew Dreschel, he's got a bunch of gyms out there in Connecticut, and he's big time, prime time. Yeah. And a lady came up to me, and there are people who come up to, oh man, congratulations on the book. That's a good book. And that's all they give you. And you kind of tell if they read it or if they didn't. But, say thank you anyway. But when the lady was going chapter by chapter, and when you said this, and when you did this, I was like, oh my goodness, I put the book down. I said, oh my goodness, you're speaking directly to me. I had to fight back the tears because this was like, okay, hold on, I got a whole bunch of people in this line. I can't be all, uncontrollably in a mess. And I had that happen to me probably about 5 or 6 times where someone came to me and gave me like really in detail. I've had personal friends come up to me and tell me, but I was like, okay, they're probably just saying that to make me feel good. And when I heard it from complete strangers, I was blown away, man. I was like, whoa. And my mindset shifted because, just to be straight honest, when you write a book, you think like nobody's really going to maybe feel your book and nobody's really kind of be into it. Yes. And then there's this part of, okay, well, I just wanted to do well. So as an athlete, former athlete, I get into the competitive to hide from some of the uncomfortable feeling of if the book is going to be even, adequate. Like, I struggle with this. This is probably going to be an inadequate book and people are going to like whatever. And I start looking at the numbers. I want to get this many numbers. I want to get this. And when I heard those 4 or 5 compliments and they went into detailed stories, it shifted the way I saw this. I was saying, wow, like, and it sounds so cliche, but if those people are really genuinely being touched, like I was like, man, like I've kind of done what I was supposed to do then, you know what I mean? And inspiring people. And it's not about inspiring, 100,000 people. And, although that would be nice to have lofty goals, it really shook me off of this idea of trying to play the number game and going, you know what? people really appreciate the book. So I can say it has been really rewarding in that regards. And just the support from my friends, from the fans, the people who've supported the Everyone Can Be a Ninja book, the Everyone Can Be a Ninja challenge. So I'm super excited about this process, about the book.
I love it. The book's called Everyone Can Be a Ninja. And I'm reading here as I'm looking through the book, and in page 202 is where you really open up about your walk with the Lord. And I really want you to kind of take me through maybe what life was like as a kid, faith. And I know you grew up in a different environment, certainly growing up in some of the tougher environments, and then coming to Christ in college, and how transparent you are about sharing that story, especially watching a movie and the dreams that you had. I think it's powerful testimony. So please take us through that, maybe what faith was like growing up, and then when Christ became real to you.
Well, Christ was always real to me growing up. I grew up in a dual, and most people don't know this because they hear the name and some people will automatically assume, oh, Akbar's Muslim. Well, there's some truth to it in that I grew up in a dual religious household. So my father is Muslim. My mother has since passed, but was Christian. And we would wake up on the weekends and we would pray in Arabic, and then we would pray, the Christian prayer. And the one thing that my parents did, they did a phenomenal job, is raising us to be mindful of prayer and the importance of prayer. And every morning we prayed. We had to get up before we brush our teeth. Did you pray? You couldn't walk out the room before you hearing your parents cut you across the room. Did you pray? Did you pray? You got to go pray. And so that's something that my parents taught me at a very young age, taught all of us. There's, the groups, there's 7 of us. But I remember, too, growing up, Mom and Dad would have really spirited debates about religion, about their faith, from the Islamic perspective to the Christian perspective. They would bring out the Quran and the Bible. And I can still remember, I can still see them in my head now, and the conversation. And, I think back now, especially in the world that we're into, like, there's this whole jihad thing and, Christians and Muslims and just the intolerance. But my parents, they practiced tolerance of each other. And, it wasn't always cookies and creams. I mean, they definitely, there was they had a tumultuous relationship. But I can say that I'm very proud of my parents and how they handled raising kids and with 2 different beliefs. That's hard to do. That's hard to do. I could imagine that now as a father raising my kids in a dual religious household. But I identified as Muslim. In fact, I remembered my first year in college practicing Ramadan in college. And as a defensive lineman, you got to be big. And I can see the coaches looking at us sideways like, all right, you guys are losing all this weight. Yeah. Not to mention, I came in at a defensive end, 224 pounds from Crenshaw High School to San Diego State. So I couldn't afford to be losing any type of weight. And so, but after that, there was a couple of us, Oz Akeem, who played in the NFL. There was Ephraim Salam, who played in the NFL. Yeah. And those are some of my brother, of course, who played for the Packers. And so we were like the only Muslims on the team. And we would do Ramadan together. And then after that year, I was just kind of thinking, I was like, you know what? I'm kind of Muslim because my dad is Muslim. And it was just because the respect and the love that I have for my father and him as the head of the household that I just did what my father did. And I went through that year, my sophomore year, saying I was no religion. I just believed in God. And I wanted to be able to come and find and have God kind of touch me in my own, like in my own personal life, like to me, like, because I was under the influence of my parents, but mostly like my dad's faith. And that's when I said to myself, okay, you know what? No religion, just believe in God. I started going to a campus church called the Rock Church, led by Pastor Miles McPherson. Yeah. And he spoke to me in a way that was just different. First off, he was a former athlete. He was, an African-American guy that spoke the way I spoke, had some of the same experiences, and he was a teacher. And sometimes just the way the message comes across. And I started digging and I'm listening. I thought, oh, okay, cool. And I'll come back and I'll go casually. But then I just wanted to go. I just wanted to go. And again, there was no religion. I was just going. I was going on my own, not because my mom called me and said, "Are you going to church? Did you do?" I wasn't being. My parents weren't bothering me to do that. They just kind of, let me be, so to speak. And that's when I had a series of dreams. Probably after a year, maybe a little less than a year, I had a series of dreams that was really vivid. And the first time I had it, it was like from a movie. And I was trapped inside of the same scenario in the movie, and I'm doing the same thing. And I could hear a voice saying, to give your life to Christ. And if I didn't, I was going to hell. And I thought, oh, whatever, this just a dream. Right. I'm not one of those guys that say, oh man, I saw, a spirit or somebody came. I'm not one of those guys. Yeah. I don't just say it just to say it to sound cool or whatever. And then the dream happened again, and I just thought, wow, that was really weird. Huh. All right. On with the practice and, finals and, where am I going to get some food as a, hungry college student? Of course. And then I had a dream, not the third night, because the first two dreams were back to back, but it was like a couple of days later, I had the dream again. And that's when it paused me. And I'm going, whoa, this is a message that's clearly not trying to get, and that's when I had to make the decision. And it was there that I started to go continuously to church, and then that's when I gave my life to Christ. But it's been life-changing for me in the way that I see the world, in the way that I raise my family now, in the way I approach a lot of stuff. But, there are also two, areas where I see that I can also see myself getting better, just having a better command of the Bible, being able to spend the same amount of time studying it like I did football, like I did when I wanted to pass the finals, spending that type of time. And I call it just intentionality, being intentional with studying the Word of God.
How was that when you became a Christian, sort of opened up your faith to your dad? I'm wondering what that was like. You said your dad was very open. Obviously, he married a woman who was Christian, but what was that like? Because it is different in the beliefs and the faith. And I wonder just kind of what that relationship was like and how it is, him and you.
Well, I love my dad to death. My dad is, a leader, a friend, everything you could want in a dad. Yeah. But I remember the conversation, and just for a little background. So my mom and dad, if I recall, married as Muslim, and then my mom converted to Christianity. But this is back in the day, way before I was born. So I don't know what happened in the 60s and 70s.
Sure.
But when I came to the world and when I started to be able to have memory and form memory, that's what I knew them and grew up with them as Muslim and Christian.
Sure.
But I remember telling my dad, because my mom had passed. No, my mom hadn't passed yet. So no, my mom was alive when I converted. But I remember telling my dad, and I just remember I can still hear his voice. He was sad. He was just like, okay, well, I figured when you guys came to the Western world that there was a good chance that you guys would grow up as Christians because of the Western world, and just still read the Quran, and I want you to, But he was very, very understanding. There was no high pressure. There was no turning his shoulder against me. Like I wish the world had more tolerance, like my father, and understanding and compassion and empathy. But he is all of that in one. And so even though he stands strong and firm to his belief,
sure,
he never down talked me. My dad will call me and say Merry Christmas. And so it's not like he ever. But again, I mean, he had years. If he can do that with his own wife, I'm sure it wasn't hard to do that with. And that's why sometimes I'm a little more sensitive than most, that when I see a lot of the fighting with the Christian and Muslim community, I'm a little sensitive to that, because I'm like, man, like clearly you can have there's only one truth, first off, but clearly you can have difference in opinions and not have to fight and kill each other, or to speak badly of someone, or so on and so forth. Like the truth will handle that. Like,
right.
Like you and I can say 2 + 2. I can say 4 and you can say 5. And I don't have to put you down. I don't have to call you names. I don't have to fight with you, because only the truth will set you free. Only the truth will reveal itself. And so, and it's not, it's not flesh and blood.
Yeah.
And so I think we get that. But so anyways, I digress on that. But my father was very accepting of my faith coming into Christianity.
Has it helped you you said it certainly has helped you in the sense of having this empathy, which I believe empathy is a game changer. I've really learned this myself, just in understanding that people are people and God loves everyone. But what has that been like for you in terms of conversations and being able to talk to people about your faith, especially with the name that you have, being Akbar Gbajabiamila, but being able to talk about your Christian faith and maybe even having conversations with people who are of differing beliefs than yourself?
Well, I think people have, I've always been called, I think since I was young, I was called like the diplomat, the guy who can come in there and, speak. It's just, I think it's a gift that God has given me. But I do feel that I've taken a lot of the empathetic ways of my father, and I've inherited a lot of that. And so I think it falls kind of in line of what I do in line of work, and what you do, Jason, is, just being a good listener. And I can strongly disagree with someone, their lifestyle choices and so on, but just listen and try to be empathetic and put myself in their shoes. I'm going to hit a topic real quick here that's probably not going to be favorable, but I think you'll understand where I'm going.
Sure.
In that, like, I grew up listening to Whitney Houston, and one of the darkest parts of Whitney Houston's life is her struggle with drugs. My mother struggled with alcoholism, and it is very easy to be judgmental. And I just recently had an experience where I thought to myself, from an empathetic standpoint, oh, wow, like, I guess I could understand. I did a book tour, and I am no Whitney Houston. I am no Michael Jackson.
Sure.
But I did a book tour, small book tour.
Yeah.
I did 10 cities or 11 cities in 13 days. And that was from West Coast to East Coast to the Midwest. I just circled the globe, or the United States. And I was literally in one city, and I was getting between 3 and 4 hours of sleep. Traveling from one airport, getting to the next one, doing an interview, and then moving on to the next. And I was getting worn down. And I was like, man, I just remember, like, I just need some coffee. I just need something to get me going, because by the time I got to day 7 and I remember getting to the airport, and I looked at the lady dead in her face, and she goes, "Where are you going?" I was like, I have no idea. I'm not, wow. I was just going in and out of airports, and I was like, I have no idea where I'm going. She goes, and I said, hold on, let me look at my phone. I said, oh, I'm going to Connecticut. She goes, okay, where in Connecticut? I go, oh my Lord. I just gave her a state. I was like, I need to look that up. I don't know where I'm going. Like, I was just done.
Yeah.
I was fried. I was done. And I said, boy, I think I know how these people start to experiment with drugs. Not saying that it's right, but sure. I could empathize how you could write. And look, I was just signing autographs and talking and shaking hands. These people are going out there and they're dancing and they're physically getting involved, and they're, doing all this other stuff. And I was like, man, like, I could see how someone could fall prey to that, and fall victim to that. And I could see how they could go down this dark path. And it just made me go like, wow, it's so easy for people to be judgmental from the outside. But when you're kind of in it, or you kind of get a little taste of it, you're going, oh boy, I can see how this person could go down this way. And so anyways, I said that because, the same thing with when you disagree with someone. Sometimes we disagree with people because we only have our own experiences and we don't know the other side. I don't know what it's like growing up in a Muslim culture, and that's all you know, and that's all you've been taught. I don't know what it's like to grow up in, Nigeria like my dad did. I don't know that, and like, there's all these other experiences I never had. So the best thing I could do is listen. It's the best thing I could do, is just to listen. And I could disagree, and to be fair, to share, like, hey, this is why I disagree. This is how I disagree. Or maybe it's not the time to share why I disagree. Maybe it's just time for me to process and then come back and disagree. But I think oftentimes we miss the ability to share the Lord's word because we can rush to judgment, or we can rush to really impress people. Like, look, I got it right. I got it right. I'm the right, like, and not really realizing the impact that we can, especially the ones that are close to us. I'm talking about the ones that are close to us now, the people that we know that we can reach and teach, because we're so quick to essentially embrace self-pride. And I think, when you look at, 1 Corinthians 13, and it talks about love is kind, love is patient. It does not keep records of wrong. It is also, you're not gloating and boasting about, hey, look how much I know, and I'm the best here, I'm the best there. Like, it's just really being able to share and to be able to teach people about how God has impacted your life without putting someone else down. And there may come a time where you have to be firm and in correction. I'm not saying everything has to be, dance and no conflict. It's not like, we got to avoid conflict. It's not about avoiding conflict as much as it is learning to listen and to really understand the person.
It's truth plus love, right?
Yes.
And that's really what it is. And I think when we're supposed to be Christ-like, Jesus was probably one of the best listeners, which I think is interesting when you read Scripture and you read the Gospels. He listened just as well as he stood up on the mountaintop and preached, because he was understanding to others, yet he didn't compromise who he was and what his message was. I think that's a really great example. Tell me about how you integrate that now with your kids, because that's a hard thing to do. For us, listening as parents is hard because we're constantly correcting and teaching and loving, but listening is hard for our kids. How do you implement that as a dad?
Well, you're right. To teach the kids to listen, it's just really stopping them in their track, and it's just patience and endurance. Because as you know, you're going to have to repeat yourself a million times before the kids, because kids naturally want to go in their own direction and they want to kind of do that. But, while they're in the directive stage, you want to be able to direct them. And it's very easy as a parent to kind of capitulate to your kids' desire to want to go their own way. But, okay, well, I don't want them to be upset with me, and I just want to be friends with them. And so I'll just let them slide. But it's very important to teach them the ability to just stop and listen. And sometimes I'm talking, my kids will just start talking. So, okay, if we're both talking at the same time, we can't learn. You have to be able to listen. And I always try to get them or sometimes they're quiet, but their brain is racing and thinking about what they're going to say next. And we do that as adults. We're racing and thinking about the next thing to say, or you heard the first 5 seconds of what somebody else said, and you want to respond already without listening to the whole picture. Maybe it's anxiety that I'm going to forget my point, so I better get it out now so I can cut this person off right now. You're not doing a lot of listening. You're doing a lot of responding. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And responding and listening are two different things.
Absolutely. A couple more questions here with Akbar Gbajabiamila. The new book is called Everyone Can Be a Ninja. We haven't even talked about the NFL, which I'm actually okay with. It doesn't always have to be a football conversation here. But I would ask you, from your perspective, having played in the NFL, especially being an undrafted free agent, and, not everything was handed to you. You had to earn every single penny, every single, cent that you made by pushing and driving and grinding. What's the greatest lesson you learned as an NFL player that you've now taken with you post-NFL career and the journey that you're on?
Preparation. I think preparation is the key, because I think two things stand out to me: being cut and making the team. And I made the team as an undrafted free agent because I was prepared as a defensive end. And it was everything to me. I was shocked. When I made that team, I'll never forget, making the NFL and hiding from the Grim Reaper. We call the person who cuts you the Grim Reaper. Yeah. And I was in the auxiliary locker room, meaning that you were dead men walking. Yes. They had given me the number 69 as a defensive lineman, which is a nasty number for your listeners who may not know the football culture. Nobody wants to wear a non-defensive line number. I wanted to be in the 90s, and they gave me a 60 number. I was like, that's an offensive lineman. And then on top of that, they gave me 69. So you can only imagine the colorful jokes that I got in practice in regards to that. And so I was like, okay, the writing's on the wall. They drafted a first-round defensive lineman. They had a veteran in Trace Armstrong. Tony Bryant was just coming off an injury. They had a linebacker in Sam Williams that they converted to a defensive end. They drafted a speedster fourth rounder. I'm like, I don't know that I fit in this in this group, man. Like it's all being stacked up against me.
Yeah.
And I'm coming out of the locker room, and Bill Romanowski slaps me on the butt and goes, "Hey, congratulations, man! You made the team." And I'm like, "No, I still have like 2 minutes," because it was 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and that's when the rosters had to be locked. I was like, like no. And then when the horn blew, I just started crying underneath my helmet, because I realized, it's like, man, I had prepared for this moment almost all my life. Yeah. And to make the team as an undrafted free agent when everything seemed to be stacked against me, I was like, whoa. And it was preparation, but it was also preparation and lack of preparation that got me cut from the NFL. Because in my second season, I switched over to outside linebacker. This is when the 3-4 defense was hot. Rob Ryan just coming over from the Patriots as the linebacker coach, and the Patriots were just starting their dynasty, and everybody wanted to switch over to 3-4, and they could switch a defensive end to a 3-4. Well, it exposed something in me, that I didn't know football the way I thought I knew football. I knew the defensive line play. I could be a defensive line coach right now in the NFL, and I think I'd be a pretty good one. But then when it got into going into linebacker position and dropping into coverage, that's where I was like, I don't know route combinations, and I don't know what a cover 2, cover 3 is, and I can't identify the weaknesses of these things. And so Rob Ryan's trying to teach me, and I'm having a hard time. And it's just, I'm not getting it when I'm supposed to drop into coverage, where I'm supposed to be, and how to read the field. And so anyways, long story short, I get cut. And it's that principle of preparation. I was like, man, I got another chance with the Chargers, where I ran into Greg Minuski, who really took the time to teach me, because he was an undrafted guy. And so he had a lot more patience in teaching me and getting me. And that developed my IQ as a football player, which later helped me in broadcasting, because I wouldn't be able to broadcast if I didn't know football. And I was so thankful for him spending that kind of time with me. But what I now taken into my own personal life, my spiritual life is like, if you're not prepared, you're not going to succeed. And it's so simple, though. If you're prepared, you'll succeed. And so many times people will say, oh, it's just lucky. But it's not real luck as much as it is preparation meeting opportunity. When you get an opportunity and you're prepared, it means, oh, you got lucky, man. No, I was really prepared for the opportunity once those two met together. And it's just taking advantage of that. And so there's so many different blessings that we miss sometimes because we're not prepared for that opportunity. There could be a blessing right around the corner. You could have just driven through one, drove past one, or you're in one, but you haven't fully succeeded because you aren't prepared. And whatever that is, that could be, again, professionally, that could be in your home personal life, that could be your spiritual life. And then we get into the complaining mode, right? And we find a way to justify the areas where we're weak. And I can say for me, and we did this in football. On Mondays, we all hated Mondays because you knew the coach was going to rip you a new one if you lost. And even when you won, you could do this better. You could do that better. You can do this. You have to be able to be introspective and be able to reflect and see how you're doing things.
This has really been great, Akbar. Thank you so much for being here. The last question I have for you, which could be the similar answer to what you just gave me or a little bit different answer, but we ask this to all of our guests, so I'd love to get your response. What is the Lord teaching you today? What are you learning from God in where he has you this season of life, now an author, along with all the other things that we mentioned with the American Ninja and NFL Network? What are you learning from God today?
Busy is not a badge of honor. Busyness is not a badge of honor. I think, it's funny now. I talk to my friends or people, and people are like, oh, man, I see you doing this. You see him doing that. You see him doing that. You're all over the place, man. It's congratulations. And it's a blessing. Thank God. God is good. Yes. But also busyness, because I think how many of us have talked to our friends? Hey, how you doing, man? I'm busy. And to me, that really is, I don't even like saying that. You won't hear me say I'm busy, because busyness can really distract you from really connecting with real relationship, your relationship at home, your relationship with your kids, your relationship with your friends, and your relationship with, more importantly, with God. And I realized in this season for me, it's been one of the busiest seasons. And, at the risk of sounding like a complainer, but I realized that relationships, they suffer when you're busy. And so being able to help, I guess to answer your question, being able to set healthy boundaries around the things that you do, the things that you love, the areas you want to grow. But you have to know yourself. You have to kind of know your purpose, and being able to identify what your purpose is, because God has given us truly all different gifts. And if you can identify the purpose in which and the gift that God has given you, that I think, you're going to be successful. When I say successful, I don't mean just money. I'm talking about you're going to be successful because it's going to be rewarding, because you're doing what God wants you to do, and not just filling your schedule up with just being a task rabbit. Like, I'm doing this, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this. And it sounds cool. Yeah. It sounds like, oh man, you're doing a lot, man. It's just like, but is that life? And at the end of the day, oh boy, one of my teammates, I still can hear his voice, Justin Fargas. He's a good friend of mine. Yeah. And Justin Fargas said to me, you know what, Akbar, we're not that important and we're going to die. I go, ooh, I was like, no, why? I mean, we're 23 at the time. I'm like, dude, why you got to say it like that? Yeah. It's true. We're not that important and we're going to die. So you might as well have the relationships that matter the most, the relationship with God, the relationship, because when you live your life as if you're going to live forever, I think that's a real warped thinking. It's a real warped thinking, and so you gotta be very intentional in what you do and how you spend your time.
Busyness is not a badge of honor. I love that. Akbar Gbajabiamila, thank you so much for being on the show. The book is called Everyone Can Be a Ninja. Even got Michael J. Fox to endorse it. I love it. This book is to inspire the warrior inside all of us. Really cool stuff. Just really thank you for being on the show. Next time we'll get you on, we'll talk a little more football and connect that world a little bit. But really, I just appreciate you. Thanks for being on the show, and let's talk again soon.
Hey, Jay, thank you so much. And I guess since we didn't get a chance to talk football, I'll give you my prediction now. The Raiders are going to win the Super Bowl. How about that?
Oh, the Raiders. He judged it just like that. Akbar, thanks, brother.
All right, thank you.
Great stuff there from Akbar Gbajabiamila. And he basically buried the lead and waited till the very end to make his prediction. I think he was serious because he kind of laughed, but I don't think he would go on a show and put it on record if he wasn't picking the Oakland Raiders to win the Super Bowl. Well, he is a former Raider, so you can sense a little bit of bias there, but they made a lot of moves this offseason and are looking to rebound, certainly from a disappointing 2018 year. We'll have to see if the Raiders can actually get to the playoffs and win a playoff game or two, or even go as far as Akbar thinks they might go and win the Super Bowl. I mean, I just can't count out Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. That's just my opinion. But listen, Akbar is awesome. Give him a follow over on Twitter. If you just search his name, Akbar_Gbaja. It's AKBAR_GBAJA. Host of NBC's Ninja Warrior, author of the new book, Everyone Can Be a Ninja. It's available everywhere books are found. You can also check it out on his website, iamakbar.com. Fascinating story. Really enjoyed the conversation, and we hope to get Akbar back on the podcast. Thanks to him. Thanks to Compassion International for sponsoring this podcast. We love Compassion. For more information about how you can help release a child from poverty, you're looking for a way to make a difference. You're looking for a way to have your money go to help someone in need. Well, how about a child who has no hope? This is where you can come in for $38 a month and sponsor a child. Go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum and consider releasing a child from poverty today. Thanks for listening. We appreciate you. You can reach us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at sports_spectrum. And check out our website, sportsspectrum.com. Every single podcast can be found there. Since episode number 1, way back in March of 2017, now over 300 episodes strong. This is the Sports Spectrum Podcast. Check them out. Go back and listen. Lots of archival content. Great content, really. Bookmark that website, sportsspectrum.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day. This is the Sports Spectrum Podcast.